The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us.
Here we are, the aftermath of more releases last week and the continuation of a direction that WWE is doing right now that really we're not completely aware of what they're trying to go, of where they're trying to go with things right now in terms of what the programming on Raw and SmackDown are supposed to be, the changes or the things they're trying to do when it comes to trying to get everything off the ground for the pay-per-views that are going to be built up for next year. Now, look, some of my podcast brethren are definitely, they're more concerned about it's the repeal of whatever Triple H, when he was at the helm of NXT, everybody feeling really upset and angry, and justifiably so, about what happened to all those stars and where they're going to be going. And you know, somebody just reading up the fact, what was it, about 70 releases we've had this year? And we've known that when there have been releases, there have been a number of names that have found their way back into wrestling somewhere, somehow. That was going to happen. But then after that, you got to think about, where does things go from here for them? Because now we're at a point where they're trying to make some changes. They definitely have a direction of where they're trying to go in terms of giving a profile of the type of stars they want to have. And I think what really it comes down to is Vince always had the vision of what he had back in the 80s. And, you know, he really wants to go ahead and finish his run. You know, by the time Vince either drops dead, because I don't think he'll ever leave the company, he'll ever step down or retire or even be a chairman emeritus. I don't think he'll do that. But I think he wants to leave some kind of a setup as to the direction that his vision is supposed to be. And I really feel like that Nick Khan is looking at what WWE was that created the style of wrestling that we know today. Because remember, what happened in the 90s into the 2000s is everyone that came in through the door, for the most part, they had to adapt. They had to change their style, or if they had a certain style, it got watered down. And that's what they did. So by doing that, the whole thought process that, okay, well, yeah, Eddie Guerrero comes in, Chris Benoit comes in, Kurt Angle comes in, Chris Jericho comes in, Rey Mysterio comes in. You know, the type of matches they would have in other organizations compared to what they would do in WWE is different. Same thing goes for Sami Zayn. Same thing goes for Kevin Owens. Same thing goes for Samoa Joe. Everybody changes up. AJ Styles, everybody changes and has to adapt. But there's no more needing of adaptation. Because I think what Vince really wants is, he really never was so much working with wrestlers. I was listening to Mattman Wrestling Podcast. They were doing Wrestling Observer Live on Sunday night. And I listened to a little bit of them. And I was saying, they were kind of bringing up some points about how WWE wants to go and bring people that are not wrestlers. And just kind of take people that are outside of the wrestling scoop. They refuse now to go after any stars that they feel like have come from the wrestling circuit. They don't want anybody with that independent wrestling experience to have to go ahead and change them up, because they don't want to be a polishing school anymore. That's what it sounds like to me. They have changed the age range as to who they want to bring on, especially for the women at 25 years old. So anybody older, they're going to get phased out. Except for the ones that have definitely done well in their run here. So like a Dolph Ziggler's or Randy Orton's or Bobby Lashley's or Drew McIntyre's, the older part of the group, you know, you still have to build for the future. And they obviously feel like they have enough stars now to work off of the old guard, and continue just to keep pushing them down our throat, because what else are they going to do? Because they have to work on getting the younger stars ready. But they're only going to get the stars they want that can adapt into WWE style quickly. So it's just like anybody that can adapt into boxing pretty quickly. Same idea here. Because in WWE style, you don't necessarily have to be the most adept and technical wrestler. You don't need to know catch as catch can or brawling or whatever else. You just need to go ahead and know how to cut the promos. Basically get your 5 moves, if that's what they're going to be doing again, and just keep it simple. Because you're just trying to build a story off the match, but you want to build a story not based on the moves. The moves do not interpret. That's what I feel like is happening now. But either which way, in the meantime, to fill the 3 hours on Raw, to fill the 2 hours on SmackDown, with some of the stars they still have that are real workers and wrestlers, they're going to continue to keep putting them out there because they need to go and fill time. But you'll notice certain stars will not get the particular time when it comes to the pay-per-views. They're going to have certain stars that will make the pay-per-views that will be necessary. But that's where they are. And we know there's a bit more of a turnover probably on the women's side than there is on the men's side. It's the men's side that really needs the most work. Because you still have quite a few stars right now. On the women's side, you don't have a large roster. But that's not even what the company does. We know that when it comes to any other company out there, okay, cases in point, Moose is now world heavyweight champion in Impact Wrestling, and he has multiple people that are going after him and the belt. Immediately after he came out, you identified all these different people that were wanting to go after him because how he wronged them to win the title of Bound for Glory. When you look at AEW, you have a ranking system. So not necessarily where they have to have stars built out. So like I heard Busted Open and David LaGreca and Bully Ray talking about, if Adam Hangman Page should win over Kenny Omega at Full Gear this weekend. But Bully Ray tries to put up the point of, well, they need to have stars lined up to bring forward to be ready if Adam Page is to win the belt. Who are going to be his next opponents? Well, they have a ranking system. And regardless, they've made win-loss records. They've made their ranking system matter. It's been made, they've legitimized it. It's not something goofy. They definitely take it to heart. The tournaments that they have to lead up to the TBS title coming up, the inaugural TBS championship, for the world title, those things matter. Like those are legitimate wrestlers that are coming in now that are going to get a chance to go after the world title. That's what it's coming down to. So that all works. They have their own system set, which is different than everybody else. When you look at MLW, it's different. Because they also have a number of stars they can have to go after Alexander Hammerstone, whether it be Mads Kruger or whether it be Jackie Fatu or, who knows. But there's that. Like everybody has multiple titles, but you have different people that can go after each other, and you can have different matches and different variations. But WWE doesn't want to do that. And they've been doing it for a long time. We complained about it because they've had the manpower to go ahead and bring up certain stars up to the title level to go after. But we know that when it comes to tag team titles, there are going to be a couple of tag teams, the champions and the challengers, and there's only going to be one set of challengers. One challenger per whatever. And this new system they've put in place since Thunderdome of the championship contenders matches. So the mentality that Bully Ray or David LaGreca might have put on Busted Open is because they're thinking WWE style. Because they're thinking of the fact that WWE doesn't legitimize contenders only based on their past work. Because we know they're not building at all towards the future in terms of having certain stars win, get momentum, get a build, get some heat on them, and eventually you're waiting for the real chase. Some stars get the chase in a program, and that's it. But it only stays for the program, and that's all there is to it. So we've seen that now with Rhea Ripley earlier this year. We've seen that with Bianca Belair earlier this year. But they don't continue that chase. Even though they're young, they're hungry, and they could always be going back after that belt. That's not the mindset of this company. WWE doesn't want to do it that way. They refuse not to. And this creates an indifference to the internet wrestling community. So all the podcasters out there, okay, of the ones I listen to, I'll listen to Janie from NY and his Off the Script show. I'll listen over to Don Tony, Anthony Missionary Thomas, and the Wrestling Soup and the Don Tony show and all that stuff. So I'm hearing fan podcasts. I'm listening to the veterans, and I'll listen to some clips, and of course listen to some Wrestling Observer and their thought process. I get what they're trying to do. It's not for me to go ahead and make some kind of sense in terms of that it's a good thing or not. But I get it. I don't think that still doesn't look good to me. I don't really care for it. I still watch it. But I have to think about the dumbing down, the simplification of what they're doing right now. It has to do with the fact that it's going to, remember, they got the global audience, keeping the storyline simple. And, they don't really care about logic sometimes or finding any continuity. That's been obvious. But this company feels like they can go and keep doing that. It's only when it matters. Okay, they're not so overly concerned about the ratings because we know the ratings took another tumble this week on Raw. And, third hour was really bad. SmackDown coming back to Fox, did fine. So there's consistency on the numbers, but the one thing was the third hour of Monday Night Raw was hurt badly because Monday Night Football got really good at the end. Bears and Steelers was just doing really well. It was a late comeback to the game, down to the wire. Then there was the whole thing about the taunting call, which should have been a no call, during the game. All of that. Like, there was just a lot of rumbling going on with the Monday Night Football game that got people probably to turn over around 10 o'clock, and that's when the shut-off of Raw came. Because look at what they did. They were stretching out storylines as much as they can. When you look at what they did this past week, stretching out Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens, stretching out a 5-woman contenders match for the Raw Women's title against Becky Lynch, right? All of that. But remember, the only time we get any kind of build at all, the reason we might have somebody that is deemed worthy to go after the belt, whether we think they're going to be a winner or not, Liv Morgan, all of a sudden, she's deemed worthy because she won the match in a 5-way. Other than that, they haven't booked Liv Morgan much at all. They booked her a little bit to kind of give her a little bit of a shine against Carmella. That was it. But I believe Carmella got the one over the feud before they drafted over to Raw. So what else? The other thought process is that for their pay-per-views, it is what it is. It's their decision on what they're going to decide to do. Now, one of the things they decided to do, among other things, was the direction of Survivor Series and why they decided to go ahead and do what they did when it comes to booking Survivor Series. Now, I didn't really care for seeing what they were going to be doing for Survivor Series anyway, based on the fact that, we're going to get this all here of the, the Raw versus SmackDown feud, bragging rights, as I've called it many times before. Pretty much the same thing. For WWE, the live touring is getting back to its lull. It's not that hard demand that they had before, right after pandemic. It only took a couple of months for that just to die down. We talked about that. Full Gear is going to probably get to sell out or close to it. Looking at their numbers right now, they are 2,000 seats away from selling out Target Center, but they also have the other nights they're also running as well. At the moment, Survivor Series, I believe they have not sold out the Barclays Center yet. But, they're starting off the next year. They're already ahead of their earnings right now because that $50 million check from Saudi Arabia really helps out when it comes down to it. So if they have a little bit of a loss leader in terms of their tickets for other shows, then they're going to deal with that. Survivor Series is kind of just a throwaway. They're not paying too much attention. They couldn't get The Rock if they were going to try to bring him on for, a match, or were they going to plan any other bigger matches? Because they already did that for October. They built that big pay-per-view so that they could do it again. I guess Survivor Series doesn't get that kind of build. But it's because it's a gimmick pay-per-view. So maybe Survivor Series in the future will no longer be one of the big four, even though we all herald it as a big four pay-per-view. But next year, it could very well be in a bigger venue. Well, I forget where they put it at. But they chose not to worry about that this year. They already know they're going to go back to New York. They've already been there earlier this year. And so, who knows? If people want to go back to it and they feel like they're going to get somewhere with it. Who knows? Next year, they're going to TD Garden. So, it's going to be an arena show. And they can always try to do something to get that show built up and get it out there and probably sell some cheap seats if they need to kind of fill up the end of it. So in the matches they set up 2 Survivor Series matches for the men and women. They also set up champion versus champion matches on the Raw and SmackDown Women's Champion and the WWE and Universal Champions, right? So those 4 matches, are in stone. The other thing, too, is that, with some of the fans out there that, Survivor Series alone is usually enough of a name to say, okay, let's go ahead and go to the show. Well, now they've booked the matches. Now you got 4 matches 11 days out as I record this, and now they have enough time to go and say, okay, if you want to go and get tickets, now they know what the show's going to be. It's a pretty good lineup they'll have overall. Other than that, Survivor Series is going to have men's side, Raw side will be Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, Rey Mysterio, and Dominic Mysterio. Team SmackDown is Drew McIntyre, King Woods, Sami Zayn, Jeff Hardy, and Happy Corbin. Women's Survivor Series, Team Raw, Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, Liv Morgan, Camilla, and Queen Zelina. Team SmackDown, Sasha Banks, Shayna Baszler, Shotzi, Natalya, and Aaliyah. What I don't care for is when they have to go and do the setup of the Survivor Series matches, right? And then they all have to try to coexist as a team, which you already know that's going to happen. But let's just be honest with each other. No one's caring about the Raw versus SmackDown thing. There is no bragging rights to call about, especially when you just had the draft. That's an obvious thing I'm saying right there that all my fellow podcast brethren have said is already. So I'm just repeating it. I'm not saying anything new. What I am going to say new is that we shouldn't care about Survivor Series right now. They have not given us a reason to. Are we going to watch the show? Yeah, of course. Am I going to do a post show about it? Of course I am. But that's it. It's a non-factor to this show. And you know what? WWE is treating it like such because they decided to promote it on Twitter. They went on Twitter and they said, okay, we're going to name the Raw and SmackDown Survivor Series matches. But we're going to mention the teams. Tells you a lot of what they're thinking about it. Now, it's also what they're doing is very experimental. They know that their social media reach is huge. So if they're not going to go ahead and do the announcements on the program right away, then why not do it here? They may mention of it on Raw this Monday night. They'll make mention of it on SmackDown later. So 2 weeks away, they decided to start now building up into the Survivor Series mode. And so all the current storylines will now take a backseat. Okay. So we know that Big E and Seth Rollins are down the line. That's a set match that they're going to get to eventually. Liv Morgan and Becky Lynch, that's a match you're going to have down the line. Charlotte and Sasha Banks will eventually be a match that will be done down the line. And as for Roman Reigns, do we have an opponent for him yet? They haven't even thought about that. So they're considering what they're going to do right now. They're just going to go autopilot now. Now they get to go autopilot a little bit because of where things are. And they continue to downsize. They continue to go ahead and really become lean, mean running machine. The NXT show is starting to feel a little bit of a fade because now the audience is starting to go back to where NXT was before they changed the black and gold to the rainbow, the 2.0 era. You know, the audience is there. And I'll tell you what the problem with that show is. 2 hours is just too long. We were used to the developmental show as an hour-long format. This 2-hour thing sucks. And it doesn't need to be live. So I don't know what they're going to do right there. That's going to be a problem they're going to go ahead and have to uncover, because if they hit a certain benchmark that gets lower than 600,000, I would imagine, they're going to have to figure some things out. But then they also are going to be hoping that by now they have certain stars they have on NXT that they're trying to build up that are eventually going to move over to the main roster. Look what they did with Toxic Attraction. That was like 30, 40 minutes alone of those 3 stars being put up in a trios match, making a big deal out of them. You know, Braun Breaker, they're obviously putting some big time behind as well. And, you know, there's others. And they also do some consistent work on building the same star. So if it's Joe Gacy or it's the, whoever the professor is, I forget his name now. It's just not important. If it's Lash Legend, if it's Tony D'Angelo, they obviously have their stars they're trying to build up right now, and getting them enough exposure at NXT till they can get themselves move forward. You know, that works out okay. But when it comes down the line of what this company wants to do when they need to get a big show put together, there's another younger stars that they're going to just deem not ready, and they're not going to do anything with. They're going to wait. They're going to hold off right now until it's deemed necessary. Until there's a down the line where they feel like, okay, we need to go and do something here. We got to get some other stars to put up. And the problem is, whoever you decide to go and bring up, they're going to all get beaten, by the likes of whichever champion you have on the brand. Because I believe that, Becky Lynch will hold on to the Raw title. Charlotte will hold on to the SmackDown title. Roman Reigns, there's nobody stepping up to take that title from him. I think the one belt that is definitely vulnerable is Big E holding on to that belt against Seth Rollins. Absolutely. But there's just no predictability at all. And it's just facilitating what they have. They're just basically making do of the time they have on television to fill it. And that's all they're doing right now. Because of what they're doing, it doesn't really matter. Like, if you look at WWE, do you really feel like there's anything they're doing at all that really matters? That you are watching live and you absolutely have to say, I have to keep watching this. I'm going to miss something. Do you ever really feel that way anymore? There was a time when you didn't. When you feel like, wow, I got to make sure I don't go step away and grab a snack or go order some Uber Eats or go use the bathroom. Now you have multiple reasons to go. You're not given a reason to feel like you have to go and worry about, am I going to miss something if I don't catch up this week, if I don't watch this week? Ask yourself the question. When you look at it, we're getting great matches. We're getting very good matches across, okay? Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins, long match, good match. Does it matter? And, put it like this. Kevin Steen and Tyler Black had good matches in Ring of Honor. Does it matter here? The thing is, those guys work with each other for a long time. They're familiar with each other. Then you go to RK Bros, Street Profits, Dirty Dogs, AJ Styles, and Omos, and you go another long tag team match here. And with these 4 teams, and you're just milking it dry. And then Bobby Lashley is a non-factor because they're putting him in the storyline for the Survivor Series going after Dominic Mysterio. Okay? So actually, where I read the story about Lashley not being on the card, that actually should have been changed, but I'll need to go and change it on my end. So I will real quick. So Bobby Lashley is in the Raw Survivor Series match. And after being champion, he's just kind of by the wayside. Same thing with Drew McIntyre. By the wayside. Why? What does that do? And there might be a couple of stars they're working on that they might be interesting down the line. Austin Theory, obviously, there's an interest there. Some peculiar things that are going on with him. Big E did have a match, non-title. But even if Chad Gable is getting good matches here, doesn't matter. I mean, he's part of a tag team. And now, being in a tag team doesn't matter because they're not even putting him for the tag team titles. So when you have to rely on certain stars and just milk it dry because you had a lot of time to fill. That's what they did on Raw. On SmackDown, pretty much the same thing. To milk New Day and Usos because those are legitimate names that they can always put out there and people will care. Especially the audience watching in the arena. They'll be all over that. Especially the kids because we've seen these teams together against each other so many times. So New Day and Bloodline, that's what you got right there. It's a good way to keep Roman Reigns out of dealing with anything in the ring, and just Usos have to go and do the work. Because with Roman Reigns, they don't have to make him defend the title all the time, which makes him more special, which makes him a big deal. Because the lack of is what makes him so much better. So Roman Reigns is still the best booked guy right now on WWE's main roster. And there's no question of everybody out there. He's been protected. He's been protected. Good for him. the Shayna Baszler, Naomi stuff, whatever that's all about, and the whole thing with Sonya Deville, it's just a TV storyline. They're never going to build something like this into pay-per-view. Like, are you going to put Naomi and Sonya Deville into a match on Survivor Series? No. Because why do we care about what happens to Naomi? She's been given multiple chances. It's nothing against her. But what has WWE done with stars we've seen over and over and over in the mid-card get a little bit of a focus, a little bit of a spotlight, and take it away? They give it and take it away all the time. So why do we care now? When you want to just keep going back to the well with somebody and trying to reposition them again. Let's put them back in that spotlight again. Let's see if we can get them over this time. Let's do a little something, get them over this time. And it doesn't work. And you just have a number of stars in the middle sputtering. Meanwhile, there's only a handful at the very top, while the rest of the mid card is at a ceiling where only a couple names stay on top. And really, you have to go through so much. It's like almost, it really feels like WCW when you look at certain stars stayed on top because of their name recognition, their name value, plus the contracts they have. I don't know if it's so much here now, but really you got to think about it. They have the stars they want to bank on, the ones that are reliable, the ones that, Vince and Bruce and all the other people feel are reliable are the common names, the synonymous. They're not in it for themselves as much as they are in it for the company. They are company people. The ones that are in the company now that are champions or getting near, those are loyal. They are loyal to the brand. They are loyal to WWE. They're part of the show. And they consider going to be there for as long as they need to. When you have other stars you feel like are not going to be part of it, well, you already know. If you feel like Kevin Owens is going to be on the way out, but he's still doing his job. He's been doing great work. Given nothing to work off of. Two of your champions on the men's side that held the Raw Women's title, or the Raw Men's title, the WWE Championship. Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley. Lashley is a fill-in on Survivor Series. That's his status now. Drew McIntyre moved over to the SmackDown brand. He's doing open challenges. This is what they decided to do. And when you give an open challenge to someone like a Ricochet, does it really matter? No. And then also Ricochet's tied in with Mansoor and Mustafa Ali. Doesn't matter. And then I asked myself, okay, Baron Corbin being retooled as Happy Corbin, and he has Riddick Moss as a potential to move up. Who knows where that goes down the line, but Happy Corbin, Baron Corbin has a spot. They never let him get towards the belt. Rarely do they ever let him get towards the title. He's had so much time there. I'm wondering why they never decide to do that with him if they just feel like it's somebody that doesn't have to be like that. I hate to say this, and people will give me some shit for saying it, but it's almost like Happy Corbin has to be like this Randy Orton status where you don't necessarily need him to have a belt, but you put him in features. And that's it. It's like The Miz. You also don't need to have a belt around him all the time, but he's featured. Right? And that's what you do. Hit Row, you lose B-Fab, and now the word is that, they felt like Hit Row did not need a female in the entourage. Okay. Well, I don't know if it makes much of a difference now, but honestly, Hit Row doesn't mean anything to me by going after Sami Zayn, who's also been made to feel as much not much of a factor. Sami Zayn also fits in that Miz role because they've had him out there with Logan Paul. When they need to go ahead and do certain things, Sami Zayn's been a company guy. I don't know. You have all these mid-carders that just have a certain role, and if they're still going to be giving some kind of airtime, and they're still going to be used properly in some way, shape, or form without going after a belt, is it going to be good? Are we going to really care? Probably not so much. but they're familiar on screen, and people will like them, and people will go to see them. They'll be happy if they have to go and watch them in the ring or doing some promos. But are they going to be really overly excited? Like, remember, at any WWE show now, if you're going to it, you're going there probably to go see Roman Reigns first, then Becky Lynch, then New Day, then the Usos, and then you go after that. Sasha Banks, yes. And then how much else is after that? And how many of those stars are young that you really feel like there's something that you really want to go and see? I feel like Bianca Belair fits that spot. But who else? Not Shotzi, not Liv Morgan. There's nobody in really the young men, Los Lotharios? No. But really, they have a certain nucleus of stars that they work off of. That's it. And, this is the direction they decided to go. For why, I don't know. But there are some stories that have been talked about it. For instance, there's a story that Bleacher Report put out. Superstars or superheroes? What lies ahead after the shift in roster building? So they brought up a couple of points in this. 71 wrestlers in 2021 that WWE has let go. 41 were from the NXT brand. The ones that Triple H had selected as stars who fit his vision into the brand. But that's not the company's vision. And I could have told you this years ago that there was a problem coming up because some of the stars that were made into projects that were brought up to the main roster did not work out. What Triple H did was he tried to go a different direction. When he was given the helm of NXT, what he tried to do was, instead of trying to go ahead and create some projects that were going to fizzle out, that was going to be too much pressure. He says, well, no, let's just go after stars that already are really good wrestlers, and then we can work enough to get them to be a certain point. But remember, of the people that came to NXT and moved up into the main roster from Triple H's helm, how many of those really had, that had promo ability that overshot what they had in their work rate? That's the question. How many of those stars do you have that were incredible promos that came up to the main roster and then eventually, and their work rate could have been secondary? So if you know that you have a star like a Keith Lee or a Karrion Kross where you feel like, okay, the promo ability, you can have a long promo and you can have a long match and you'd have all that time to work with those stars and keep the audience engaged. Well, number one, you didn't give them time. Now, Triple H might have thought and given them time, and they did get time on NXT, but that's NXT. It's not part of the main roster. What Triple H did, for his credit, was he got more eyeballs to the product. He created an indie brand within WWE. And what I think really happened was with Triple H is that the direction he did by pillaging the other rosters only helped, because it made sure that everybody else could not really build up to a certain level. Because for a long time, for more than a decade, there was nobody after TNA that even could come close to having the TV time or having the wherewithal to do anything. So what did it hurt them to take this roster of talent, all these people from Ring of Honor, all these people that might have been cast off from Impact that couldn't afford, and give them the money and see if we can get some of these stars to come back out and do something. Some of them that did stand the test of time, that stood out, were absolutely Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley, because they came back with chips on their shoulder. They were completely embedded in the old system, whether it's Florida Championship Wrestling, Ohio Valley Wrestling, and the like. They were built all the way from there. And to know that, they come back, they wanted to come back, they wanted to, prove themselves, they did. They wanted to prove themselves to Vince. And they have done it. So now they can be lifers, but maybe now, that doesn't matter if they're going to stay at the top, because they know that the company has to go ahead and change it around. There's only certain stars that get to be on top all the time at the marquee. That's what they're going to choose to do. Okay. And that's where they're going to go. Now, As we mentioned, Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer Newsletter, companies seeking talents in their 20s on TV focus on bigger, younger people with an athletic background. The company is molding and shaping them the way it wants rather than relying on past indie credibility to get over talent with fans, teaching raw, athletic young stars the WWE style, which they can turn around and do. There's no question about that. The truth is, you see what UFC can bring up in certain fighters and certain stars that become, larger than life, like a Conor McGregor. You look at a Tyson Fury in some cases. You can see some stars that have, could be able to cut promos just like anybody else. Tom Lawler is a good example. Just people that are out there. Now, I did 2 shows last week, and I never not mentioned this about the earnings call, but this is mentioned in the Bleacher Report article. Stephanie McMahon on the call, she said this, quote, "In terms of superstars, the best comparison I could think of is Disney's Marvel superheroes. Each superhero is their own individual franchise, and the WWE has just begun to unlock some of their incredible intellectual property, or IP, which dates back generations. Each superstar being their own brand with their own story. Yeah, their own universe. So this is, in an idea, a cinematic universe. Just like Fast and Furious. Just like, say the Dune universe being created. Or Star Wars. Or DC Comics. All of that. It's creating franchises. So they have the same idea here where they are feeling like they can be Marvel Studios. With so many different brands and offshoots, prequels, sequels, everything that they could do. And then Eric Beeson there at Bleacher Report talks about, might the company be looking to replicate that successful model, creating stars from scratch and hoping they can become internationally recognized superheroes? Yes. Yes, they are. That's why they're doing what they're doing. They do not want anybody else that has come in with a wrestling background. They're going to build from scratch. They're going to be molded, disciplined in the art of WWE style. They're going to talk the lingo. They're going to talk to themselves and be called sports entertainers. They're not going to be caught up in the idea, well, I want to be a wrestler. No. No, believe it or not, Braun Strowman was supposed to be that. He was one of the few stars they never decided to go and put to the NXT or anything like that. No, they were going to push him right up. Omos, same thing. Athletic background. We're just going to put him out there. Will it work out? We'll find out. But those kind of stars, Vince loves those. If you want to put Omos out there in tag team matches and really hide him behind everybody else, yeah, sure. Seeing these superhero stars doing incredible things, which is the other part. They want that superhuman strength kind of feel, which is why they do what they did with Omos, trying to do like kicks and all this stuff, sabak kicks and all this thing, or Bianca Belair doing feats of strength, right? These kind of ideas is to create superheroes. It is what they're trying to do. They can't do it with everybody. Now, Eric Beeston writes pros and cons. He says he's dismissed the idea of building their own stars rather than relying on recognizable indie competitors to carry the company forward. Why would those in power want to recruit untrained athletes and go through all the trouble of teaching them before they can ever actually have a coherent match? But they've done that. Brock Lesnar is a great example. Roman Reigns is a great example. They want those kind of stars. We've already said that before. So why not? And there might have been some stars that might have gotten their start in the wrestling biz, but, they weren't there long enough to become a name, and they get brought over here. That's where Undertaker came in. That's where, you could say Giant or Big Show kind of felt like that, too. To a point, Mark Henry obviously felt like that. Those stars, notice how many times they gave them so much, which they were still doing anyway. And Eric Beeston is saying what I'm talking about. Whether it's right or wrong, the homegrown talent the company amasses will have a greater opportunity to succeed at the next level than the Roderick Strongs or the Kyle O'Reillys ever would have. Or the Johnny Garganos, for that matter. Or, Cameron Grimes. Like, pick all those names in NXT that are still around and see what they're going to do. Andre Chase, Tony D'Angelo, all these different stars. You're building them out from nowhere. I don't know how many of those people have certain athletic backgrounds or where they come from, or if they were just wrestlers that were brought in working in other organizations. We don't know yet. I'm not sure about it yet. he brings up a good point, Eric, about the WCW Invasion, which I did not watch. Because he said himself, you have wrestlers, all from wrestling backgrounds in WCW coming in and seeing names struggling to find a foot in the company because the boss wasn't directly involved in their success. But also it's because there were certain stars that you were going to take that you felt like you could do something with. They would allow some athletes to break the mold. So Eddie Guerrero, Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, they allowed some of those stars to make their way through. But they have this performance center for a reason. So if they want to go this route and find a way to get themselves somewhere, sure, why not? They're going to go this anyway. The problem is the IWC is still, they're still indifferent about it. There's still a delusion of the fact that they still matter, and that, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, some of my podcast brethren still believe that the stars like a Kyle O'Reilly or Johnny Gargano or, you know, or Karen Cross or Keith Lee with their wrestling backgrounds, they would have made it well on the main roster. You can say that, but it's not what Vince wants. He doesn't want wrestlers. He doesn't want to create a wrestling promotion. He's always felt that way. He's done some of it because it is wrestling, in essence, and he needs to have some stars that could do good matches to fill the gaps of the stars that people are going to be coming there to go see. You got to have some. They're not going to be the attractions. And that's what the problem is right now, is that WWE does not have enough attractions. And they can't call on previous part-time attractions to come back and fill the roles. They're going to have to build new attractions. That's what it comes down to that. I mean, it's like going to a theme park. You need attractions. You need some place that people want to go be on that ride. They want to be part of that experience. And you just can't have something just to be something. And that's what makes them stand out above everybody else. And it's because of that thought process. Even when you look back, if I wanted to go and evaluate, even going back into the 80s, the Rock and Wrestling era, into the Attitude era, into the Ruthless Aggression era, you can think about all the stars that were brought over. You can think about The Rock and his football background. Now, there are certain stars that are going to be attractions just because of where they are. The Samoan background really helps out for Roman Reigns or The Rock, or, you know, going back to the Samoan SWAT team, or, you know, Rikishi and all of that. And then the Usos, all of that. And that's why there's certain Samoan stars now in NXT they're trying to build from the ranks. Meanwhile, there are some stars that they are bringing in that could still do something as well when you look at a Braun Breaker. But even he, you know, is a wrestling background, a Greco-Roman wrestling background. Same thing Brock Lesnar was. They have those guys that they can have that are still, it's still athletes. It's not professional wrestling. They'll take Greco-Roman stars. They'll take, obviously, a star like a Kurt Angle. And then they've, you know, they don't feel like the MMA in that background is so much here. There's not enough of them right now they would actually consider, and that was the other thing for them. So when you look at what they've done, I mean, there's just, they want to go after people that are actually athletes, and not the ones that just know all they've ever done is work in a squared circle and take bumps and do high spots and no wrestling psychology. It doesn't matter to the WWE. They have to have some of that because they need to incorporate some wrestling. So there are going to be a handful of stars that will be around because people will be there to watch wrestling, because there are going to be some fans wanting to watch wrestling. You always got to have a little bit of wrestling in there of just the workers, right? That's what you have. But as we know, when Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were leading the charge in the mid-90s of the WWE after Hulk Hogan left for WCW, and then there was the rest of the excess of attractions that went over to WCW, you know, they couldn't build any attractions that were worth a shit. And they didn't. So they had to go a route where they had all these wrestlers, and they decided to go ahead and go with an attitude. So they went a direction that really did resonate with wrestling fans. The wrestling fans that like professional wrestling, that got them back into WWE again. After feeling faded away from the mid-90s, they got them back. And they got a cool factor as a result as well. Because of the time, the period it was where you have the Jerry Springers of the world and the Maury Povages of the world and cops and cheaters and all this kind of stuff going on, all this salacious programming out there. You had that. But that time's gone. And people don't understand that. And just because what has to happen now is that all these indie wrestlers, they need to know that AEW has already positioned themselves as the pro wrestling mecca. If you are somebody that's worked wrestling indie and you've only done professional wrestling, the peak of where you want to be now, it's being totally identified. It's AEW. Now you want to be an AEW to say you made it. Because AEW, when you just look at Full Gear right now and what they're doing, it's making wrestlers say, you know what? I want to go there now because that is where I'm going to get the big time. I'm going to be in the big time of professional wrestling. But if I want to be in the big top, I want to be an attraction. And I want to have access to the movie studios and the TV studios. And I want to be able to do something more in the professional wrestling in my career. Then that's when I go to WWE. Because what people don't understand as well, how many of these stars that we saw released, and I hate to say this like this about the stars that were gone away. It sucks to see them go, right? But really, you look at Keith Lee, you look at Karrion Kross is a different story. It's still, they never gave anything a chance. I don't know why, but it's also because Karrion Kross's character was just very moody and very dark. And there's only one star that gets to be like that, and that's Undertaker. And right now, there's nobody else. They just can't have a number of, darker characters. They don't want to have dark. They want exciting. They want vibrant. Because Karrion Kross is all in black. Like, remember, even the helmet they put on him was red. The suspenders were red. They were trying to add some color to him. Even with Keith Lee, the one thing about him, overweight. Even if he might have lost some weight now, same thing goes. And that's it. And also, there's only enough, room for other big guys like him. They already got Kevin Owens there that's been overweight. And he's the only one that gets to be that. He gets to do that. Otis didn't stay like that. Otis lost weight. He got himself in the shape. Nobody else gets to be like that. Not only that, the athletes that they get out there that are going to be on the main roster, the one that WWE wants, they are the ones that get chiseled. Now, I give a lot of credit for the stars that have been here, and then they found their way. Hey, they've made themselves chiseled. Listen, the ones that have adapted to the style, Finn Balor is a great example. Seth Rollins, an amazing example. CrossFit Jesus himself. Those guys have worked on building themselves into such a muscle mass and to be in incredible shape. Becky Lynch, same thing. Bayley, the same way. You look at Bianca Belair, you look at Sasha Banks, all in incredible shape. Specimens. They're athletes. And then you look at some of the stars they've had that are models. They were fitness models. Had the body. So if you want to try to convert, say a Mandy Rose, and I think they've done a very good job with Mandy Rose now on NXT as part of Toxic Attraction. That gimmick's, I think, is starting to get over. And I think it'll do just fine if they go to the main roster with it. But it's Mandy Rose's team. Jacy Jayne and Gigi Dolan, they're just part of it. They're just sidekicks in the entourage. But other than that, they don't make much of a difference. You got one redhead, and you got one darker haired, and that's it. But Mandy Rose is the attraction. If they could just have Mandy Rose, they would. I really feel like that's their way there too. But really, you look at larger than life, chiseled, athletic to the max. Because they're not looking for baseball players. They're not looking for, They're looking for athletes. The athletes have to be in top condition, have to be in such amazing condition, period, and have that muscle and look like they do. You can just see that. And I know that my podcast wrestling brethren out there, they want to say something. They want to keep pushing it. The IWC is going to keep pushing the narrative. They're going to never stop. And that's okay. But this is why you have to worry about what's going on in other companies. This is why I always talk about other companies going on. But wrestling is made an attraction thanks to WWE. We are grateful to them for doing what they do. We have to accept that. Just because we feel like there are certain stars that deserve or they should be entitled to that, that's not the way it works. They're not going to do that. And that's not what they want. I get it. What are you going to do? But this is what allows All Elite Wrestling to have their own lane. It's obvious that the NXT experiment of putting them up head-to-head against AEW, they were going to try to go and use that to hold off AEW anyway, and that was their direction for that. But the truth is, they're going to stay in their own lane. Just like they keep talking about in their earnings call, just like Nick Khan talks about, they're going to stay in their own lane. They're going to do things their way. They're going to build attractions. They're going to be like a circus. They're going to be like a big, theme park. They're going to be, again, entertainment, but have the sports aspect by having all these big stars. Another example I always think about, American Gladiators. American Gladiators definitely fits that same role. And I think there's always going to be room for some wrestlers, traditional wrestlers, to stay on the roster because of what they're going to do. But they have to understand they're not going to be any up higher a ceiling. They'll get paid well. Who knows? You might find somebody you'll get to hook up with. Who knows what might happen there? Maybe some other opportunities come to the door. But for right now, how many stars do you see right now in AEW or any other brand for that matter? You think a movie studio would absolutely be calling, or TV studio saying, we want to have you for a project. We want to have you for a reality show. We want to have you for, some kind of endorsement. How many of those stars in AEW or Impact or MLW, or even Ring of Honor for that matter, who are doing that right now? Anybody? I don't see them. Hate to be that guy, but I am. It makes sense. So they're going to decide to do what they're going to decide to do. Now, I need to go move along because I still got to talk about Full Gear. So tonight, listen, I am regularly watching Dark Evolution and Dark. I enjoy them. It's good programming, especially because they put it up on YouTube. Just to go and be able to watch it on my phone, it's good to have where I can just keep it right there, watch the matches. I'm in the shower, I'm getting ready for bed, I'm doing whatever, or I'm waiting for Raw or SmackDown or something else to start, or Dynamite, or whatever. So I'm waiting for something else to come on, and I'll catch Elevation and Dark. And those are just fun little shows to go and watch, and I can see certain stars that they're obviously looking at what they can do with. And they have some quirky, jobbers in there, and it's just the old school style that I like. And they're a little bit different. Dynamite and Rampage just give me wrestling. When I look at AEW, I'm not worried about them trying to compete with WWE. It's not anything that we're going to worry about in the future anyway. But AEW serves an absolute purpose, and there's absolutely an audience that wants to watch professional wrestling that they're going to draw. But they don't need to be worried about WWE style. And when the stars they have brought over from the other brands, you notice they're not working WWE style, which is the biggest difference. Looking at Leo Rush tonight, that guy working like $1 million out there, looking great. Bryan Danielson looking amazing out there. Him and Bobby Fish throwing a clinic out there. Hell of a first match. And Bryan Danielson, you have him out there, or CM Punk, and then seeing him go out there and just roll, man. Or Adam Cole getting to do what he wants to do. Like, all that stuff is just working out great. It's just fun. I mean, the card that they have for Full Gear coming up Saturday is incredible. I am always excited for an AEW show. These pay-per-views just kick ass. I can't tell you how many matches I am excited to watch for this pay-per-view. And this is also the fact you got to remember that now they have, after All Out, all this influx of talent, and they're all embedded now in the storylines, and they're all embedded in the show. So you got World Championship, Kenny Omega, Hangman Page. We've been waiting for this forever. Now it's here, and I think Hangman Page is going to win. I think he will take the belt off of Kenny Omega. I believe that's going to happen. And we know that Miro's going to be, I believe he wins the world title eliminator finals because of that case. Now, if Kenny Omega wins, well, if Bryan Danielson wins, then maybe Kenny Omega stays around, and then we get Danielson Omega, we'll get that match again. Whatever. But I really believe that Hangman Page wins the world title. By the way, Don Callis coming back after all that time off as the camera guy. What a great move right there. Fucking hilarious. I really was like, what a swerve. Good stuff. Because that contract signing was like, okay, pedestrian. But then they gave us that shocker at the end. Like, oh, man, Don Callis, you piece of shit. Wonderful. AEW Women's World Title. They've built that well. Ty Conti is number one contender in the rankings. And Dr. Britt Baker, I don't think Ty Conti's won that belt. So Dr. Britt Baker, keep her out there. She's holding on to that belt. And they'll have other stars ready to go after her. You're always going to have somebody to go after. What I really want is I want Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa to go after each other. If Thunder Rosa's not going to get that TBS title, let's get Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa back on board and get them into a feud again so that we can have Thunder Rosa back chasing for the world title again. I really want that. Inner Circle, Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, Sammy Guevara, Santana Ortiz versus Men of the Year, Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page, and American Top Team with his Junior Dos Santos, Andre Arlovsky, and Dan Lambert. And I forget, so Junior Dos Santos, it was a heavyweight in UFC, former champion. Andre Arlovsky, I never really followed him, but he was also a former heavyweight champion. Older, but he's definitely been out there and he's, made his point out there and also. That's good. So you got a bunch of heavyweights in there, and I really feel like Dan Lambert has done a lot for just the attachment of American Top Team with the Men of the Year. Page and Sky have really been they've been elevated quite a bit. So I could definitely see where, say, if Lucha Brothers retain over FTR, could you see Page and Sky go after Lucha Brothers for the tag titles? Sure. I could absolutely see that. I think they were down the line, they might look at something like that where, they're getting that tag team, which is just so stacked anyway. World Tag Team titles, I said Lucha Brothers against FTR. I'm going to say, I'm going to say Men of the Year and American Top Team win over Inner Circle. By the way, what a beatdown. And even with the Inner Circle, but then if the Inner Circle got beat down, Inner Circle has to win, right? And maybe that's what they're going to do with them. So let's just say Inner Circle wins. I say Lucha Brothers will win and retain the World Tag Team titles over FTR. And then you got a couple of just some grudge matches that are just solid shit. You got one of the Young Guns, the Pillars, as they now being referred to. And three of those pillars are being focused on this show. So you look at MJF and Darby Allin. You know what? I can't even just go. Words cannot express how much I want to watch this match. Fucking MJF is one of my favorites right now to watch. Like, it's a love-hate thing, man. That guy is really good. He is really damn good. One of the best heels we've ever had in our time. He's a throwback. I think I said it the other day. Give me like a Nick Bockwinkel, a Larry Zbyszko, and a Ric Flair, and a Roddy Piper. He's rolled into that. This guy has obviously learned from the classics of heels and become that. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy went back to Gorgeous George or, whatever. Like, this is just something there. And Darby Allin, I think Darby Allin, man, Can MJF take another loss on pay-per-view? I don't know. I think MJF gets the win. Because Darby Allin's been out there. And by the way, no Sting at ringside, I guess. They're not going to have him out there. Then you got CM Punk and Eddie Kingston, which they heated that shit up in 3 weeks. And man, that thing looks good. Eddie Kingston doing some massive work. I think this is going to be a better match than his match against Jon Moxley. All due respect to Jon Moxley, he's having to take time off for himself, and we wish the best. But I remember that feud was damn good, but this is like Eddie Kingston now just hitting on all cylinders. And, we want to see Eddie Kingston just continue to do well. Another guy I like, one of my favorite faces right now. This guy's just fantastic. So him and CM Punk, and I don't know if Eddie Kingston, I guess he's playing the heel here, but that match should be really fun. There should be some real brutal goings-on in that match. Super Click versus the Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus, and Christian Cage, Falls Count Anywhere. It's going to be hard for me to think that the Super Click don't win. They've given them some wins on TV, but will they get the win here? I think they do. But look at that card. Shit. And what was it they just put out now for the pre-show, for the buy-in? I forget, they just added another match for the buy-in as well. Let me look back and see if they've already put that out there. Oh, the buy-in is Nyla Rose, Jimmy Hayter versus Hikaru Shida and Thunder Rosa. I mean, shit. I don't like that too. It's, they just got a fucking massive card. Oh, also got to remember that another match they just added is just now been added, and I don't think they made an announcement on the show, or if they did, I missed it. Cody Rhodes and Pac will take on Andrade El Idolo and Malachi Black. If you want to stack this card some more, shit. Like, that's some major stacking up of this card. It's going to be a long pay-per-view, too, man. That's massive. So, let's go with those matches. The buy-in, I think Hikaru Shida and Thunder Rosa will win. And when it comes to the tag team match, Andrade Idolo and Malachi Black, I take for the win. That's what I think things are. Man, that's some good shit. Okay, one other thing I got to bring up. Ring of Honor Final Battle, they have their show already set up. They have their matches set up. So here's what we have, which could be very well their final show. I don't like the idea of this, but I really feel like there's nothing else coming out of this. It just feels like Ring of Honor. And you know what? I'd like to see how sentimental it is going to be when we start seeing these folks out here and we see this show happen. I mean, it's not a bad card at all. It's pretty good when you look at it. So you have the Ring of Honor Women's World Title. Roxy, the champion, will take on Willow Nightingale, who I've been watching on MLW. Either going to be Willow Nightingale, Allison Kay, Manny Leon, or Trish Adora that will be taking her on. I'll say Roxy retains. Bandito versus Flamita for the Ring of Honor World Television title. And I'll still stick with Bandito. Dragon Lee versus EC3 for the World Television title. I'll take EC3. Shane Taylor Promotions, Shane Taylor, Moses, and Khan versus the Mexican squad of Flamita, Bandito, and Rey Oris. Yeah, they got to keep working guys double, right? As for the Ring of Honor World Six-Man Tag Team titles, La Faction Ingobernable, Dragon Lee and Kenny King versus the OGK, Matt Taven and Mike Bennett, accompanied by Maria Kanellis versus Violence Limited, Homicide and Chris Dickinson for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships. I'll say Matt Taven and Mike Bennett win the tag team titles. I'll give it that. No Briscoes on this show, no Dalton Castle, no Jay Lethal, and no Jonathan Gresham for that matter. That's where we are. No Flip Gordon. I'd like to see some of these stars are going to still be noticed. They're still get a chance to get out there and be seen. Especially with this being the last show. Even if you might feel it's like a hiatus, I don't see why it's anything else but the last show for them. But I will do a post show for that. We'll talk about it. And I'll really, if I feel like this is what's going to happen, nobody might be talking about it so much, but I really feel like this is going to be the end for them. I don't see where they come back after 3 months and they decide they're going to just retool and restart. After all the evidence I gave on this show last week, I don't think it's possible. I don't think so. Or 2 weeks ago. I don't think it's happening. So we'll leave it there. I will be doing a post show after Full Gear right here, WrestlingIsReal.com. Make sure to go ahead and check out the website. Look for the episode drop right there. And also make sure to subscribe wherever you find the podcast. Amazon, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all those amazing places. WrestlingIsReal.com. Of course, follow me on social media at King of Podcasts. I'm everywhere. Also go to my website, kingofpodcasts.com. If you want to find me for everything that's going on with me. And that's it. Come back after. Enjoy AEW Full Gear. It's going to be a fantastic show, I'm sure. And we'll come back and do a Wrestling's Real podcast because wrestling needs us.
Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.